Thank you, Your Honor. May it please the court. And thank you, counsel. I'd like to start today by first thanking you for fulfilling your constitutional and organic act duties to hear the evidence that the people are bringing in this case against Mark Torre Jr. You've sat through a month of testimony, 50 witnesses, a lot of documents on your own time. You've called up people who were there before the incident, who saw what went on. We brought expert witnesses, the FBI, our own territorial medical examiner, Dr. Espinola. We've heard testimony of defense's forensic pathologists. You've heard testimony of psychiatrists, psychologists. You've heard testimony of policemen, firemen, medics, advanced life support. All those who assisted afterwards have been called, including those who know Bert. We've shown you the physical evidence. We've shown you the firearm. We've shown you the bullet. We've shown you the clothing. We've shown you video. We've let you listen to audio. We've given you a lot of documents that have been admitted into evidence. Pictures. As the judge has indicated, he will instruct you on the law. So whatever I say that you believe is law, the judge controls. What I'm bringing in my presentation this morning are the facts. The facts that show beyond a reasonable doubt that Mark Torre Jr. was guilty of the crimes for which he's been charged. The burden of proof is on the people. It's not on the defendant. That burden of proof is attainable. It's not beyond all doubt. It's attainable. We believe at the close of today's arguments, and after you go into deliberation and you're careful, you too will find the defendant guilty of the charges for which he's been charged. The charges that have been presented, you will see on your verdict forms and in the instructions: murder with a deadly weapon, manslaughter with a deadly weapon, negligent homicide with a deadly weapon, and aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. As I indicated, the judge will instruct you on the law. I'm only here to present the evidence. You'll see the charges, beginning with aggravated assault. In each of these charges, we know that Bird was deceased because of a gunshot. The deadly weapon was used. That fact is proved beyond a reasonable doubt. That deadly weapon is a special allegation to the charge. Now within homicide, there are 3 possible charges. As I had indicated, negligent homicide, which is a lesser included offense of manslaughter, which is a lesser included offense of murder, and negligent homicide as well is going to be, because it's within the same set, a lesser included offense to murder. You'll be asked to deliberate on each one of these charges. You will vote on these charges. In order for us to achieve a conviction, you must have a unanimous vote. The judge will instruct you on all of this. Knowing an unlawful use of a deadly weapon, I want to take a minute just to make sure that you see the facts as we see them, as the people have put forward. On or about July 13, 2015 in Guam, Mark Torre did knowingly and lawfully possess or use a deadly weapon, that is a pistol, in the commission of a felony. We've heard some evidence from investigator Camacho, at least from 154 to 214 on July 13, 2015. At 140 Chow and Jose Anday Street in Jigo. Mr. Torre was aware, and he unlawfully shot his Glock 27 pistol. When he murdered, when he committed manslaughter, if that should be the verdict. When he committed negligent homicide, if that should be the verdict. When he committed aggravated assault, if that should be the verdict. This special allegation attaches to each one of those alleged crimes. We first take up aggravated assault. On or about July 13, 2015 in Guam, Mark A. Torre Jr. recklessly caused serious bodily injury to another, that is Albert G. Piolo, in circumstances manifesting extreme indifference to the value of human life. Everybody's going to be arguing today what this really means. For the purposes of this slide in my presentation, I want to take up bodily injury. You will receive an instruction on bodily injury. It's injury which creates a substantial risk of death or severe or intense physical pain or impairment of consciousness or the function of any bodily member or organ. This charge is presented because there was intense pain and suffering and destruction of organ. Bert suffered greatly before he died. That's what the evidence shows, both on the 9/11 and the body cam. Dr. Cohen said he might have experienced some pain. I think he did, in fact, experience quite a bit of pain. He's heard moaning and pleading. He describes on 911 that he's bleeding out. And you've seen the autopsy photos. The autopsy photos show the path of destruction that that bullet had taken, causing intense pain. Spend a little bit of time on recklessly. The person acts recklessly, and again, if this differs from what the judge instructs, please listen to the judge. He acts recklessly when he acts in awareness of a substantial risk that his conduct will cause the result, awareness of a risk. His conduct causes the result, and his disregard is unjustifiable. His disregard of the risk is unjustifiable. And it constitutes a gross deviation from the standard of care that a reasonable person would exercise in the situation. How do we know it's reckless? Well, you heard testimony about a general order, police policy and procedure. Do not combine alcohol with a gun, and it reads, when you're going to use the gun. There's no other reason to have a gun. It's in the event of use. Additionally, we know that Mr. Torre is trained in the military. Additional safety training must have been had in the military. He's trained in SWAT, which is advanced training. He's got a great deal of training and experience. That training and experience does not entitle him to be ignorant of safety. It does not entitle him to risk when he should know better. He's not entitled to be reckless. Negligent homicide. Charge you're going to receive is going to read something like, on or about July 13, 2015 in Guam, through criminal negligence, Mark Torre caused the death of another human being, that is Albert G. Piolo. This is negligent homicide. It requires a different type of thinking in his mind. The focus here is should be aware. Should be aware. Should be aware. As opposed to reckless, which is aware. Should be aware is an ordinary person. Failure to be aware of the risk is ignoring common sense. It should really be common sense that you should not combine alcohol with a gun. This is a bad idea. Yet he ignored that risk. And we'll see that we will prove beyond reasonable doubt as I go through the evidence that he did in fact cause the death of Albert Piolo. Aggravated assault, negligent homicide, manslaughter. On or about July 13, 2015 in Guam, Mark Torre recklessly caused the death of another human being, that is Albert G. Piolo. It's a lesser included charge to murder like negligent homicide is. Once again, he's aware. It's not he should have been. He is aware. He's aware through training, through police policy and procedure, that it's a risk to combine these things. It's a very, very dangerous risk. And his disregard is unjustifiable. Unjustifiable. and it's a gross deviation from the standard of care that a reasonable person would exercise in the situation. The evidence we presented, and I'll argue again, is he acted despite his awareness of these risks that he obtained through his training and experience. And his disregard is substantial, and there's just no justification for it. Murder. On or about July 13, 2015, in Guam, Mark Torre Jr. recklessly caused the death of another human being at his Albergito under circumstances manifesting extreme indifference to the value of human life. What you see added on here is extreme indifference. Extreme indifference. The circumstances here went over and above just combining guns and alcohol. He was indifferent because of where he placed the pistol. He placed the pistol up against his chest cavity. In the factual argument, you'll see that he came at it from the side. If you're standing facing frontward, you don't always see what's going on the side. He also used a large caliber handgun, a .40 caliber handgun. And he used a hollow point bullet, which is designed to puncture and tumble. Even Dr. Cohen said this thing tumbles as it comes out. That's extreme indifference. As if, just to say it, we'll just do it. On or about July 13, 2015, 154, 215, 36, 214, at 140, Challen Jose Andy, recklessly, drunkenly, plus the combination of the gun. Killed Bert. By pointing the pistol point blank at his chest. I'd like to just spend just another minute going through to help you. Again, if this is law, it's the judge who matters. It's not me. Negligent homicide, gross deviation. Failure to be aware of risk of guns and alcohol. Does it make sense to carry a gun? Manslaughter. Awareness, this is the reckless part. Awareness of the risk. Police procedures, intense training. Disregard is unjustifiable. Unjustifiable. Awareness of a risk that it's unjustifiable plus extreme indifference. These are the building blocks that you might work on to find facts, to find the charge. There's a great deal of evidence that we put forward to you. And what you're about to see is that with that evidence, we were actually able to construct a detailed timeline. This is just an overview of the timeline. On July 12th, we hear testimony from his father and from himself that he started drinking because they were watching a UFC fight. They wanted to go, I think it was TGI Fridays, but they ended up staying home. By 11 p.m. on the 12th, which is a Sunday, he's consumed several beers, and he drives to the bar, drives to the beach bar. What does he bring with him? He brings his weapon. He brings it concealed in his waistband. Around 12 a.m. on the 13th, he drives to abandoned ship. We know this. He ended up there. They made plans. Bert went along. (1:54 to 2:14, 2:15) is an approximate time that Mark shoots Bert. We know this because 1:54, he's got a text or WhatsApp or Snapchat with Layla. 2:14 is when Mark starts calling Julia. We're fixing the time of the shooting in between those minutes. 2:14:24. Mark's first call to Julia Torre. This is from the phone logs that you saw were admitted into evidence. 2:15:37. Bert's first call to 911. Sharika described it as it was an immediate click. Minute and a half later, Bert's first successful call to 911. You're going to see this is a very important event right here. Julia calls Lieutenant Mark Torre around 2:23 a.m. Around 2:24 a.m., Bert on the 911 says, "LT, he shot me. He shot me. Help me." At 2:33, GPD arrives on the scene, and around 3:23, Bert is pronounced dead. This is very important because on the 911, the recordings that have been put into evidence, there are 17 recordings. They span basically the entire time, but because there are 17 recordings, we don't know exactly. But we know that it runs to about the time GPD shows up at 2:33. So if that's 2:16, 2:17 to 2:33, that's 16 minutes where we can reconstruct what's being said, who's calling whom, who's testified to what. What's very fortunate in terms of evidence is that first 911 recording spans 9 minutes 34 seconds. So it also includes the hang-up that we hear. It also includes, as you heard, Cherikachargalov talking to other folks. It also includes background discussions. So if you start at 2:17 and you're running for 9:34, the first file on the 911 ends at approximately 2:26:34. We can plot that against Mark's cell phone, Julia's cell phone, and Bert's cell phone. And now we can begin to reconstruct what is going on in the immediate timeline after the shooting. The thing that was very fortunate about the 911 call, it's independent. It's an independent source of evidence. So it's not dependent on what's being done with each of the individual phones. We're stepping back through 911 and looking what each of the phones are doing. Bert's phone logs, Mark's phone logs, Julia's phone logs, as well as, importantly, testimony of Officer Carl Cruz. Took statements from Julia. Testimony of Lieutenant Torre. Now we also heard Deanne Torre get on the stand. Torre's mom. But it's impossible to tell when. Just that we know it was in that time frame. Nor can she be clearly heard on 911. Testimony of Cherikachargalov. We know that the body cam starts at 2:33. So then we now have a timeline. We're going to have to prove every element beyond a reasonable doubt. Beyond a reasonable doubt. Start drinking at 1 p.m. But let's back up. He was at the Guard that day. Remember his testimony. Kept his gun in his car. Knew how to put his gun in his car. Nor's common sense. Takes his gun with him to go drinking. Common sense. I think everybody would agree. It's common sense. The substantial and unjustifiable risk of the combination of the gun and alcohol increases when he starts to get very drunk at the beach bar, to a claimed point of memory loss. Nor is the general order in his trainings when the combination continues to brew. He still got in his car and drove. Drove from the beach bar to the abandoned ship. You can already see that he's aware of his risk, and he's taking some risks already. And what does he do there? He continues drinking and increases the risk that something bad will happen. Increase the risk that something bad will come about when the gun and the intoxication are mixed. for continued drinking. We see there that he's now not just driven, but he's started to act outwardly aggressive at the abandoned ship. He becomes aggressive through at least 4 people. The 2 bouncers, Crystal Paco, and Anthony Cruz, the owner of abandoned ship. Recklessness means just that. Recklessness. You don't need a reason. You don't need a motive. That's how reckless it is. You don't need a motive. You may receive an instruction today. You didn't see motive in any of the elements that I described in the charges, so it's not there. But you may receive an instruction that you can consider motive. The people argue that motive shows, lack of motive shows the recklessness, additional disregard. Testimony in the evidence shows he's been taking alcohol for about 12 hours. The last 2 hours, quite a bit of alcohol, it seems. Again, he ignores common sense. His mood becomes sour. This is where you see the motive doesn't really matter. The mood becomes sour. He was spoiling for a fight. You heard the bouncers describe how he at Bob Tony Cruz up and down 3 times. And he was rude, not just to Crystal Paco, but he was also rude to one of the people that is under his command. Somebody he's responsible for, or was responsible for. He is combining the intoxication with carrying a concealed weapon to a high degree of recklessness, and he didn't even need a motive. Did not even need a motive. Saw one of the elements is that you're going to get an instruction on criminal homicide. I didn't talk about it, but you saw that it contains all the 3 charges that result in the death of Albert Field: negligent homicide, manslaughter, and murder. He did, in fact, commit criminal homicide beyond the reasonable doubt. It's pretty clear that the shooting took place inside a Burt's truck. You'll see through the evidence if you will listen to the evidence. We know that Burt was driving. We know that Mark was sitting in the passenger seat. Remember the testimony? Come on, Part, let's go, let's go, let's go. Wanted to take him home. We see the trail of blood starts in the driver's seat. Remember Officer Barry Flores? On the body cam? There's meat in there. His impression, and he's a GP former CID, criminal investigator. Done many of these. His immediate impression is it's inside. Look at where the bullet is found. It's almost at the other end of the cab. The gun's got an ejection port on the right side. That means if you rack it, it goes backward. If you're racking it, it goes that way, and you're sitting in that seat, it's a natural resting place. Mark testified about his version based, I guess, on automatic reflexes, because it's not clear whether he's presenting a clear memory or not. He testified about doing the racking from the driver's side. Think about the mechanics of that. Bert has just allegedly gone like this, and he's grabbing the gun away from the driver's side. This is his version. Or excuse me, the reenactment version. If he's going to take that gun and rack it to clear it, how does the unexpended shell end up way over there? We see the beginning of the elements of extreme indifference as well. He's at Bert's side, he's at his periphery. He's at his periphery. Can't really see what's coming. Now there's this narrative about how he's half in and half out. Half in and half out. Look at where all that blood is. Imagine this. If I'm shot and all that slug, hot gas, and hot powder that's coming at me, why am I collapsing back inside? Look at where this is. He's a small, hate to use that word, but he's 5'3", about 150 pounds. This may be vomitous, we heard. And look at where all of this is. It's right where he was sitting. Right where he was sitting. The initial effects of the gunshot wound are clearly seen in the blood on the console and the lumbar area of the seat. There's meat in there. Very instructional. This is the expended shell. This is the shell that held the bullet that was fired into Bert. This is the sunshade. See how it's lodged in the sunshade? The suicide narrative of half in and half out doesn't explain that. Does not explain that. The demonstration that we provided does explain it. Explains it in a number of ways. With the right hand. Try it like that. Not natural for you? Right hand eject. Lodge. Try it with the left hand. We know that there was a jamming. Limp wrist. Limp wrist with the left hand. Could be one possible explanation. But look at this one. Five o'clock to the gun sight. Pointed at the chest. Right hand eject. Right into the sunshade. And it's not like on it, when you look at the evidence, you'll see there's little drops here consistent with these drops. The bullet went there before the blood. On the suicide narrative, blood comes out. Bert wanted to commit suicide. Let's remember, this weapon is concealed. He had to know there was a gun. He had to know there was a gun. Then with his 5'3", 150-pound body, he had to take that gun away. From Mr. Torre. He reaches over, has to take the gun away. He still has to contend with Mr. Torre if he's going to go like this. I think we all agree this is not the way he was going to do it. You heard the testimony of our FBI expert, Brett Mills. He actually helped us. He really did help us put this story together. And he testifies that the reason we had two holes is because it was folded over. It was folded over. Now, try keeping it folded over as you go like this to this. The thing that's very interesting is that the narrative is he changed all of a sudden. He wanted to kill himself. He changes all of a sudden. He wants to kill himself. That means that the reflexive action should have been automatic. Not what we have here. Not what we have here. The narrative is this is where the timeline starts to play. We've gone from an assumed time period. Let's think about this for a second. First call to Julia Torre, 2/14/24. 2/14/23 is probably the last time you could have done that. You'd be at a split-second dialing. 2/13, 2/14 is probably realistic for the shooting. Because we see that he starts to call Julia a number of times. 2/14. Now you're going to see, if you take a look at the evidence, her incoming voicemail is a split second before. It's that time. 2:15:34. A minute later, a second call. A second call. Four seconds later, after that second call, Bert's trying to call 911, but he doesn't get through. For whatever reason, he did not get through. (2:17:04) is when he does get through, according to Docomo's logs. It's a call that lasts roughly 3 minutes. "30 seconds later, we see Mark calling Julia again, while Bert is actually on the phone. About a minute later, he calls a fourth time. Fourth time. To Julia. At 2:19:29, which is about 2 minutes and 25 seconds into the 911, just so we're clear, the 911 runs for 9 minutes and 34 seconds. So we can put the 911 against what people are doing on the phones and what can be heard on the 911 and begin to put a picture of what's happening in the immediate minutes afterwards. In that second 911 call, you can hear, "Are you coming?" We know there's only 2 people there. Bert and Mark. "Are you coming?" calling Julia means, "Are you coming, Julia?" How do we know that? Because that's the end of the fourth call. This is what we hear. Can we turn the volume here?
Where were you shot at, sir? In your chest. Do not hit it, sir. Sir, let me speak to the person that's with. What is your address, sir? One more time. Sir. You Helen and Renshaw? Is there anyone else there with you, sir? Okay, where were you shot at, sir? In your chest. Do not hit it, sir. Sir, let me speak to the person that's with you. I need you to try to relax. Okay, I understand. Helen and Renshaw, what is your name, sir? Officer Piolo? Okay, and when I enter check, okay, sir, when I enter Helen and Renshaw, where is your residence? Straight up to the left or the right? To the left, okay, sir. Listen to me very carefully, okay, sir? Sir, there's someone else there with you, ready? Sir, put pressure on your chest, okay?
I apologize if didn't anticipate the feed into the TV, but at the end of that sequence at around 2:25, you hear him asking, "Are you coming? Are you coming?" Why is this important? This is important because we saw, or we heard from Officer Carl Cruz. Julia says she comes out. Comes out and she sees Bert. And he's lying on the ground by the driver's side. Mark's standing over him with two phones. And he says, "Help me, please." This would be about where he's lying. These are exhibits that were admitted into evidence, and you'll see where he was lying at the time. Julia Torre said she saw him on the ground pleading for his life. This is what would have been heard around that time, coordinating the time frame to the time in the call. disconnects right about 2:20. A lot of action going on in the background.
Which one?
Update, that is official officer.
Hi, this is Charles at Fire Dispatch.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, he's not cooperating with us. He's just moaning and crying. He's stating that he's with a Mark Torre, Officer Mark Torre. According to police dispatch, there's two, so we're not sure which one. Does anybody in your precinct have a 17 breakdown for his residence?
For Mark Torre?
No.
So all that is going on till about 2:20:26. Okay, 2:20:26. Can you see that at about that time? It's the fourth call, Julia. This is probably 6 minutes after the shooting. Julia states she goes back in. She tells Officer Cruz she goes back in after seeing that scene. What is happening around that time with Mark? Leaves a voice message. I'm done. We're done. I don't even know how it happened. We know that from his cell phone and her cell phone. Instead of coordinating with 911, he's leaving that message. That call was around 2:21, I believe. So from 2:21, we can now see what else is happening. Bert's able to get back on the horn. Time 15 minutes. Continuous calling on his phone. These are all his dying declarations. 22107, come here please, he shot me. 22134, I'm dying, I'm dying. Wait, what do we see here? Julia makes an outbound call to Officer Torre. Lieutenant Torre. That's about 223. 222.57 according to Docomo. From 222.57 to 223.54 is the time it took for Lieutenant Torre to get down there. Let's recall his testimony now. The phone rings. It's all supported by Mrs. Torre's testimony. Wake him up. It's Julia, she's calling. I forget the exact words, but Dad, can you please come down? There's something going on. He gets up out of his bed and he walks to the sliding glass doors, windows, sliding glass doors. The house, if you remember, he says it's from the right side, not the corner windows. He gets up and he looks down. And what does he see? He sees a truck he doesn't recognize. His testimony is, I saw Marky's face by the driver's side door that was open. But he didn't see Bert. Did not see Bert. Gets himself ready to go down, arms himself, has his flashlight, takes his phone, goes down. This is all within a minute. Goes down to the landing where Bert sees him. By this time, Bert's leaning up against Marky's truck. Now, what's really interesting here, it's not apparent, is that there's no blood in between the driveway and the front of Marky's truck. And there's blood patterns that are, who knows what they mean, but sometimes they're missing blood. Sometimes there's a trail of blood. There is a trail of blood. Starts here, goes towards the back, comes around the back, makes a zigzag pattern, goes through. We see there's quite a bit over by the trash can. Then there's no blood. You'll see in the diagrams some other exhibits. There's no blood because he's taken off his shirt by now. Can't stop the blood. Kind of explains this. Now you're wondering, where's Kathy Rosawa? She said she didn't see anything. So she didn't see anything. But in her own diagram, she sees them coming from this area towards the back of the truck. We don't know the time, but one can imagine Bert saying, oh good. As she drives away. Maybe that's how we ended up out here. Clear on the other shoulder. She didn't look back. The trail of blood that's going on that time. The time when Julia leaves. How do we know this? Because at 2:24, he's already at the truck. And in 9 minutes, the fireman will be there, an additional GPD. And if you actually listen to the 911 calls, you can hear that they're there. What does the testimony tell us of Lieutenant Torre? For at least a minute, maybe more, Mark was not always with Bert after he got shot. We know that because he says he gets up, he goes to the window, he sees Mark, but he doesn't see Bert. A minute later, he's down there. Bert's resting on the truck. So there was a minute where they weren't together. And Mark is by the driver's side. By the driver's side of the truck, Bert's truck. Kathy Rosales said she saw the door open. That was her testimony. It's also supported by Lieutenant Torre's testimony. We know that the door should have been open between 1:54 and 2:14, as late as 2:20, 2:21, when Julia Torre calls Lieutenant Torre. Door was open. Excuse me, she calls Lieutenant Torre at 2:23. So it's open as late as 2:23 when he sees it. So about 2:14 to 2:23 it was open. Gets out of bed, sees it open. Didn't see Bert. Bert could have been there, but we know a minute later he's actually in the garage. He comes down from the landing and he sees Bert here. It's his testimony a minute later. But he also sees Mark. He also sees Mark in that corner. Bert says, LT, help me. I'm dying. You already heard this. If you didn't watch carefully, you would have seen when the body cam starts, the door is shut. Somebody shut the door between the time that Lieutenant Torre looked down and saw Mark by the open door to the time that the body cam started recording. The door is shut. We'll see that in a few minutes. What was Mark doing? This was about the time he's also talking to Julia. He had the opportunity to put the gun there. Remember he was very calm on that call? It's a much later time than what is claimed in the narrative, where he wrestles it away and puts it in the dashboard. We also hear this on the second 911 file. Sheriff Chargaloff wants to make sure that it's safe for ALS and the fire department to show up, because they won't come unless the place is safe. This is what is heard.
Okay, has the weapon been secured, sir?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, I need a confirmation, so that, because our ambulance might beat the GPD. Our ambulance
In the
might
front?
beat the GPD units there, because they're coming from Chalani-Rancha, so I need to know for sure, certain that the weapon has been secured.
Yeah.
So the weapon is secured? Go ahead and have them proceed.
In the front. The second recording is not very long. How would he know that? Let's get back to the elements. The gun that killed Bert was marked beyond a reasonable doubt. He even admitted it. .40 cal was pulled from Bert's body. For Dr. Espinola, his initials are on it. This is an official conclusion on his report. Albert Galaza-Piolo came to his death as a result of a contact gunshot wound of the chest into the abdomen by homicide. Dr. Cohen wrote in his report as late as December 2016 that it was a contact gunshot wound. He agreed with it. It's on page 3. Penetrating contact gunshot wound to torso. And again at page 4, I concur with the medical examiner. This is December 2016. This is 2 months ago, less than 2 months. That the gunshot wound is of the contact type. That report was written in February by the FBI, went through its channels. We got it around April. Transmitted it to the defense. So they've had it since at least April. But he doesn't change his mind until he gets onto the stand. Dr. Cohen also agreed that the bullet tumbles and mushrooms. Hits the 5th rib. Went tumbling. It's very easy to picture it tumbling downward after being deflected off the rib. Just want to make sure that you understand. And this is not all of the times he's saying, help me, I was shot. Or help me, I'm dying. Or please help me. 609, he shot me. 631, he shot me. 637, he shot me. 650, LT, please help me, I'm dying, he shot me, he shot me. Those are called dying declarations. Identifies Mark very early on. The final element of the criminal homicide. Actual death. Building on the elements that establish murder beyond a reasonable doubt. We'll now take on extreme indifference to the value of human life. That here is shown beyond a reasonable doubt as well. Indifference, not motive. Indifference. Point blank. Whether you take it at contact or you take it at 1 to 3 inches. Remember, Mr. Mills said perfect laboratory conditions. Not the conditions that night. Not the conditions that night. Both doctors agree that it's a contact gunshot wound. And then, of course, Dr. Cohen says that he doesn't see soot or charring. You've got the benefit of looking at the evidence yourself. You'll see there is, in fact, soot and charring. Exhibit 21. Shiny dust. See it? Probably saw it when it was circulating. Once again, he's going to kill himself. Difficult to explain the 2 holes. Arm wasn't raised. Arm was down. You can see it folded. How do we know it's close range, point blank? We also have the fiber expert. Fiber expert got fibers. Heard the FBI fiber expert say he found fibers consistent. Five o'clock. 5 o'clock. Not only did he point it there, but the weapon that was used was a very dangerous weapon. The hollow point that does this as it's tumbling through the body. Now, it's not in his mind, but it's in the circumstances. It's in the circumstances. Anytime you shoot point blank into somebody's chest, you're indifferent. It's not like shooting the arm. It's not like shooting the hip. If you shoot the leg, the guy might die because maybe you hit a femoral artery. You shoot into the body, close range to the chest, there's a probability of death at that point. There's a probability of death because you're shooting into internal organs, vital organs. There was extreme indifference to the value of Bert's life beyond a reasonable doubt when Mark pointed the gun point blank. The bullet expands and starts to tumble and tears up organs. There is no self-defense here, so please ignore that. But there are some factual impossibilities, narrative inconsistencies, And I'm going to call them non-defenses. The fancy word for you can't say that you were too drunk. He didn't commit suicide. There's no evidence. No evidence whatsoever that he committed suicide. Just the narrative. And you have to ignore all the he shot me, he shot me. And you have to ignore how he's pleading for his life. And he shot himself with Mark's gun. You have to ignore all of that. All the witnesses whom you bird say he's not suicide. He did a great deal of communicating. He was not withdrawn. They had their time to look over all of his personal life in that time. Every communication. Even their own witness on the stand says no, it's not there. Even in the hour or so before he's about to die, he's expecting to live past July 13. Let's take a look at what some of those communications say. He calls Mika with his Bari, says, I'm going to be there. Coming home. He asks Sean, he wants to take care of Mark. He's asking Sean, hey Sean, where's Marky's truck? And where's Marky's car? What does he drive? What does he drive? Told Abigail he's done with his game. Communicates with Layla Long. What's on tap for Monday? What's on tap for Monday? He takes Mark home. This is someone who's caring of what's going on. These facts are just, suicide narrative is just contradictory, not credible. Dr. Code himself says, I don't know. If Mark's in the truck and Bert's taking the gun, Mark could have done something at that point in time. But he says, I don't know what's going on, but I'm outside by the driver's door. He himself says there's no struggle. No struggle. And you'll see it on the body cam. Not even. It's contrary to what was said in opening argument. Contrary to Dr. Cohen's report saying that there was a struggle. The mechanism of the suicide is difficult to reconcile. Why would Bert drive Mark home to kill himself with Mark's gun and then blame him on 911? How can that be suicide? And plead for his life. Heard a lot about alcohol-induced blackout. Now the judge will instruct you, or he may instruct you, that it's really just relevant to that he can't remember at this time. It fits the narrative because he says a lot of things in this time. Fits the narrative. If I can't remember, I can disclaim what is said. I can disclaim what's going on. I can disclaim what all these witnesses said because I don't remember. It's not a defense. And getting intoxicated is not a defense. There's some real language that you'll hear. But the first sentence is important. It's not a defense to a criminal charge. The same way reckless driving is not a defense. But it is relevant to establish or negate an element. Okay, but this is recklessness. Intoxication is relevant to establish that he recklessly murdered. And why is this important? Because if you do it voluntarily, the law, the judge, with all deference to the judge, you can't blame the intoxication because you did it voluntarily at an earlier point in time. Reckless. A person is reckless with respect to the element of the offense, even though its disregard thereof is not conscious, if its not being conscious thereof is due to self-induced intoxication. My interpretation, not what the judge is going to instruct or what counsel will argue. He was still reckless even though there was a murder. The narratives. Where does this word narrative come from? It's born of their own expert, Dr. Pablo Stewart. You'll see his report. His last reliable narrative before the incident was at the beach bar. Doesn't remember, claims not to remember what's going on at abandoned ship. And then he has fragmentary memory. Snippets of what's going on. And his next reliable narrative, depending on who you believe, let's remember, despite what was said on the stand, Dr. Donovan says that based off of reports he read, he seemed like he was coherent around 3:30 in the morning. 3:30 in the morning at the Naval Hospital. Not later on when he's at GPD. Unbelievable and incompatible with the facts because Bert would have to know. He's given away 5 inches and about 40 pounds. Had to wrestle that away. This is the mind reading. The mind reading that Dr. Donovan was so criticized for. Think about it. You've all been around folks that have had a little bit too much to drink, yes? Sometimes you just can't remember. But there's no way to scientifically prove what you can and can't remember because it's all what you tell. It's a self-report. There's no way to tell what this level of alcohol and this blackout means. It's just not reliable. It's not scientific. The fragmentary memory is convenient and it's actually part of the strategy to make it seem like he was blameless. Let's also remember that Dr. Stewart, by his own admission, was found not to be credible in his testimony in a court. I asked the same question of Dr. Donovan. That had never happened to him in 400 testimonies. Once again, the mechanism is just not there. Why does it have to start at the beach bar? So they can forget what's going on an abandoned ship. Tony Cruz, Anthony Bob. Charles Pendleton. Do you want me to slap your face? Kevin Jackson. My LT, he calls him LT, I think on the stand, because it's his LT in the guard. And Kevin Jackson actually is another witness who saw the stare down. Crystal Paco was aware of a rude comment. He gets to now, with the narrative, disclaim all of this conduct. If you believe it. If you believe it. The 911 is very instructive on the narrative because you see evasiveness. The response is, oh, who calls 911? Bert. Okay, Bert. Why is this important? Because we're avoiding the consequence of what calling 911 means. We're being invasive on that. He's talking to a bunch of other people. He's not talking to 911. He's talking with other people. He's avoiding 911 at that point. He's explaining whatever he's doing. Being invasive. Not forget, Bert's call is hung up. He's hung up on. Right around, you hear there's some commotion. Mark never answers directly what went on. It's only when he's thrown a lifeline. You'll listen to the 911. If you do, you'll see he never says, he never comes out with the narrative. He's answering in terms of avoiding it. Dogs start to get barked. He's feisty, he's feisty. Right when she's asking that, he's feisty, he's feisty. Only gives an explanation to Cherika after she says, was it self-inflicted? He never says that they're at his residence. Never once says that he's at. Who does it? It's LT Torre. He corrects them. He redirects them. This is very interesting. Towards the end of the 911, after LT shows up, it's a calm. Bert's already starting to fade. It's very calm. It's not frenetic. It's not like very early on in the 911, where there's a lot of commotion. It's starting to be very calm. This is what it sounds like.
Okay. All right, good. Just stay there. Just keep it there. Keep the pressure. Keep the pressure.
Yeah, so do not remove anything. Just hold the pressure down. He's still conscious, alert. He's still responding to you.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Bert's holding pressure.
Do you hear any of the siren gesture?
I do.
You
It
do.
sounds like they're on the move right now.
It's very calm.
Okay, yeah. Okay, you better keep the pressure. Keep the pressure there. Yeah, there you go. You're almost good. Almost good. Calm. Step 1, 2, 1, 2. Keep it there. There we go.
This is the final recording right before GPS shows up.
Okay, got the unit here.
Okay, can you let me know who was that first there?
That's call 32 is one of our.
Okay, now I'm gonna put this down.
What about GFC? That's all here?
Can you, well, I went into the GFC unit.
Okay.
Is the GFC unit there?
What's that?
Is the GFC unit the
Yes, sir.
GFC is there? Okay, sir, I'm gonna go ahead and let you go.
Okay.
See how calm it is? The body cam, if you watch it, is a fairly cohesive narrative. But the lack of memory allows him to disclaim what's going on. Narrative is a story. You can see on the body cam that he's actually responding to questions. Like he knows what's going on. The body cam shows that he's evasive. Again, he doesn't talk about what happened, he talks about what didn't happen. The answers are driven by self-focus. His friend just got shot, but he's self-focused. Trying to preserve himself. He knows he's in trouble. There's an awareness. He blames Bert. Body cam shows that he has memories. He's got memories of what went on, even though it's minutes after the event, even though it's minutes after. That's enough time for him to start forming memories, long-term memories. Tries to co-opt Edwards. You've been through stuff like this before, Johnny. He attaches emotions to the events. You're in blackout. Where's this emotion coming from? You shouldn't remember. If you're in blackout, you should not remember. Now, we've been here for a couple hours and I know I'm wearing you down. But I invite you to look at the body cam. And I'm just going to play the first few seconds because I want you to see the contrast from a state of calmness to what happens when GPD shows up, when he knows that there has to be a narrative. See how the door is shut? He recognizes they're showing up.
Get tight! Get tight! Get tight!
There was none of this get tight in the 911.
Johnny, get tight! You have to sit. He's gonna.
It wasn't a bear hug on the 911.
Hey, you talk to me. Okay, thanks. I got it.
We'd be here all day if I were to show you and stop and explain all the avoidance, but you have the benefit of the evidence. You will see there's either Avoidance, evasiveness. Sprinkled in with self-regret. It's not a regret of having done it. It's a regret of, oh my God, what's going to happen now? You can see these in the statements. D is avoidance or evasiveness. D is deflection. Not, this didn't happen. That didn't happen. Look at the blood. Deflection. Every time Edwards tries to say, tell me what's going on. Avoidance, evasiveness, deflection. $9:40 into the video. Barry Flores. Did it happen inside the truck? Did it happen outside the truck? This is ridiculous. He never, even though Charika says, was it self-inflicted? He didn't immediately say to Barry or anybody else there. He did it to himself. He only picks up again when he recalls that. Now he relates it with what Barry says. Barry says, Sergeant Barry says, was it self-inflicted? And 20, I never pointed. It doesn't say what did happen. It just says what didn't happen. He never gave me, that's at 10:38. Not sure what the rest of that sentence in his mind was. It's my fault. He says it's my fault he's about to collapse. That's the self-regret. He looks at his hands. Bertie didn't want to be a part of that. He gets another eye flying. Let's build the story more to the story that you see today. Some kind of girlfriend. He was unstable. Unstable. The guy that's driving him. The guy that's taking him home to take care of him because he was too drunk. Bert's unstable. More diversion. It tripped me out. 13 minutes in. No, not even. In response to being there being a struggle. Not even. This is ridiculous. Why the fuck am I? Trying to co-opt Edwards again. We've been through worse, Johnny. What do I do? What do I do? Bertie just wanted some self-regret. More self-regret, some expletives. What are you doing to me, Bert? I think you will find, you're reviewing all the evidence, the testimony, the dying declarations, the narrative, the extreme indifference. You will find that pointing your gun into Bert's chest at a close range while severely intoxicated was reckless, causing great pain and anguish in an assault was more than negligent homicide. That is proven beyond a reasonable doubt. More than negligent homicide. Why? It's not a should be aware, he is aware. Because he's been around guns. He's been trained. He should know better. Because he's been told directly. You don't combine guns with alcohol. And you really don't get super drunk and combine them. And there is extreme indifference when you point blank into somebody's chest. Because the probability is you'll hit organs with a tumbling bullet and cause a death. In this case, is the death of Albert Pio. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attention this morning.
Thank you.